Okay, let's begin.
Good morning, Patriot listeners. I am Susan Smith here with Jeremy Munson. We are co-hosts of Political Pitchforks, airing every week at 9 a.m. And we are here this morning with Joseph Banks, and he is running to be the sheriff in Hennepin County and looking for Republican support. And so we are going to be talking to him about some pretty interesting things. But I want to just, before we get started in this, I want to just read something out of our Constitution. It's real quick. In Minnesota, our Constitution has the Bill of Rights first, not at the end, but it's the very first thing. Mm-hmm. And the first section of Article 1 of our Bill of Rights says the object of government is instituted. The government is instituted for the security, benefit, and protection of the people, in whom all political power is inherent, together with the right to alter, modify, or reform government whenever required by the public good. And it's first. It's right there. The government is supposed to protect the people. And what we're seeing across the state and the country is an absolute failure to protect the people at every level. We're not protecting kids in schools. We're not protecting kids and their families. We're not protecting families and their right to take care of their kids. We're failing all over the place. We're using fear, innuendo, and division. It's actually quite amazing. And right now in Minnesota, obviously, we have issues with ICE, the federal government, the division there. We have a lot of political things happening, a lot of unrest in both political parties. And Amy Klobuchar just announced that she filed to run for governor, tipping over some of those issues. We have 27,000 people running for governor on the Republican Party. Maybe we're going to get that down to 5 or 6 after precinct caucus. I don't really. It could be more people are going to get in. They don't. It doesn't matter. Whatever they want. So what we have is chaos. We really have chaos all around us. And I feel like when we have chaos, people begin to do two things. They begin to strike out randomly because they're frustrated, or they just retreat. But neither is good, right? We need to take a breath. We need to just take a beat. And we need to try and figure out what's going on and what matters and how we're going to resolve this. And I don't know, Jeremy, I don't really remember very many times in my lifetime this kind of absolute chaos across the board.
Well, Susan, I'm old enough to remember 6 years ago during COVID when I thought it was absolute chaos, when the government just completely, stepped on people's civil liberties. The governor unilaterally wrote laws and enforced it and jailed people, and many people were treated as well. There were a few of us out fighting against government overreach at that time. So it wasn't that long ago that our state was in chaos. But the media and everybody else spins things so differently. You mentioned that we're having problems with ICE. Nowhere in your opening did you talk about we have problems with the open borders that we had under the Biden administration to allow tens of millions of people enter this country without screening, without permission, and
creating the chaos.
The media, creating the chaos. And one of my complaints as a Republican is that the media conflates unlawful immigration with lawful immigration.
Right.
They think that Republicans are against immigration, and I've had a lot of Republicans reach out to me saying, "How do we get out of this mess with the media that they're spinning us into something we're not?" And I said, now is the time for Republicans to take a stand and make sure that everybody is clear that we support lawful immigration.
Right.
Every immigrant that comes to this country should be a Republican, because it's our party that is about opportunity and freedom and liberty and protecting those rights and protecting our Constitution, which is why people come here, because of the freedom and an opportunity that our laws and our Constitution provide to people. And if we don't follow the laws, we don't have a country. And so we have to enforce the laws. But
Jeremy,
they are coming here because their countries have followed the socialist path. They've grown too big. They're so corrupt that they want to leave their country and come here. And it's the Republicans that should be at the border greeting them and welcoming them to this country of land of opportunity.
But
Instead,
Jeremy,
the Democrats are out there with handouts and socialism.
You're right about many of the people who are coming here for that reason. But I also know from my personal experience that there are many, many, many people who come here. They're not looking for citizenship. They love their home countries, but they don't have opportunity. Mm-hmm. So they're here, they're working, and they want to be able to go back and forth home. I mean, they want. I personally talked to somebody just who's now back in their home country because they were here illegally, had to go home because a relative got sick and couldn't come back illegally because of the violence on the border now. But they were here. They love America, and they're thankful for everything America has given them, but also weren't looking for citizenship. We're looking to fill a job that nobody here wanted to do, and they're more than happy to be able to go back and forth. And we could solve a lot of this problem just by creating a visa process that actually allows that to happen. Right?
Yeah,
So,
Well,
go ahead. You weigh in. Let's go.
Let me
Go
jump
on
in real
it.
quick. I think one of the big problems is so America kind of dug this hole, right? Because the process of getting folks processed through immigration takes years. And for whatever reason, if we could figure out a way to modify it or ratify it to speed up the process, the problem is we get people here for 10 years, and then it's like, okay, they've had children, they've built a family, they've built a life. When if we were going to turn them down, if they didn't have things in order, we should have turned them down like within weeks, maybe months, but not years.
Right.
And so that's kind of dug a hole for us, because now you got different administrations trying to keep track of people that have been here for years, and they kind of get lost in the shuffle. And before you know it, now you've got a guy who's been here 20, 30 years, and unless he commits some type of criminal act, he's not on the radar anymore. Right. And so that's kind of what's happened. And over the years, we've ended up with people here for years who have been involved in criminalistic behavior, but been untracked because they're undocumented. And the process is just kind of going on and on and on. So we do want to do, proper immigration. But I think that a lot of people don't understand the process and how we could better improve it.
That's for sure true.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get into that a little bit more in the next segment, but in the first one, let's meet our candidate for Hennepin County Sheriff. You go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background and why you're running for sheriff?
Sure. My name's Joseph Banks. My background has been law enforcement, security, and bonding, believe it or not. So I've kind of had a circle of kind of all those options. Not only that, I'm also a co-founder of a recovery organization, so I'm always on the ground working with people who are dealing with addiction, homelessness, and things of that nature. So I get a chance to see it every day from all angles. So I started my career, I almost want to say as a kid, because I started in the Police Explorers, then I became a cadet. My first job in law enforcement was a dispatcher. Right, learning that aspect of it, and then I became a part-time officer, and this is in the state of Illinois, of course. And then right around '93, I moved to Minnesota, got a law enforcement degree, became a police intern in Brainerd, went on to be a police officer up in Redwood County, then advanced to chief investigator, became the chief of police at the Upper Sioux Reservation, went down, became the chief in the city of Morton and Renville County, and then of course came back and up until 2009 I was the chief investigator at the Lower Sioux Indian Reservation. So I've kind of had quite a bit of aspect working with our federal partners, a lot of experience working with those guys. And what's unique about casinos, because people say, well, that's just a casino, this is a reservation. But uniquely enough, we get everybody's problems at the casinos, right? It's like a major concert every day of the week, right? So we get hundreds of thousands of people. We deal with all kind of different adversities of people hiding out, thinking they can come out because they got drugs, things in the entertainment field. So it's almost like a mini Vegas,
And it's the interplay with the federal, the local, you're dealing with.
Yes, you have
levels.
to learn Public Law 280. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Public Law 280, which is tribal law, right? And then you also got to learn tribal law itself, and then of course federal and state law. So it's a lot of law, a lot of collaboration with our federal partners, the DA, ATF, and the FBI. So it's a lot of collaboration.
Well, I think this is going to be a great conversation for us and for listeners, because I think as we move into the next couple of segments, I think you're going to be able to help educate people about how the different levels of law enforcement are connected and sort of how that works. And so I'm really looking forward to this, because I think it's a conversation that we need to have, and we need people to understand really how our system does work and how it isn't working, and how we could take some simple steps to really help improve all of it at every level, right? So we're glad you're here, and we'll be back in just a few short minutes. So we look forward to going into depth. Thanks.
Okay, let's begin.
Welcome back to Political Pitchforks on AM 1280 The Patriot. I'm Jeremy Munson, a former state representative here with Susan Sjogren Smith, and our candidate of the day, which is Joseph Banks. He is running for Hennepin County Sheriff. In this time where we're really asking for law and order, we're asking for our local law enforcement to partner with federal authorities to come up with a great plan for community policing and the sensitivity around all the issues in the metro. What I've really found interesting is Joseph Banks' resume in working in metro, in rural areas, working with diverse ethnic groups, and working with federal authorities. I think he's got a great resume for Hennepin County Sheriff. So, Joseph, what would be your plan as Hennepin County Sheriff? If you were Hennepin County Sheriff right now, what would you do differently than our current sheriff?
Well, the first thing I would have did was let our federal partners know that we were looking to work with them, right, through a collaborative effort. You know, in order to make things work, you got to be in those meetings. And I think one thing that I liked Vice President Vance said yesterday was that, you know, they want to work with local law enforcement, and they just need them to meet them halfway. Halfway is not bad, right? So, I mean, they're not actually asking you to do immigration. They're just asking you to show up and keep their guys safe. And I think what was important this time was, and I don't know if you guys saw it, but there was a moment when the Homeland Security called for assistance by phone because they didn't have a direct communication with local law enforcement. What was so terrible about that was initially when they called, they got a voicemail in Minneapolis, and then they gave him a non-emergency number, right? And that non-emergency number, when he called, he identified himself as a supervisor with Homeland Security. He said he had agents on the ground that were possibly being attacked, and he needed assistance. Now, Sheriff Witt said that it wasn't an emergency call because it was not on a 911 call, but he was utilizing the information that was passed on to him. But it was definitely an emergency call. And we can never have a situation where cops are calling for help and no one's on the other end of that call. That just can't happen. So that's the first part of it. The second part of it is we have to be in those meetings. Why? Because then we can talk about how we can help them best and how they can help us best. The goal is to keep everybody safe. So they can give us a list of the people they're looking for. We can match that with addresses. We can direct them and to where those folks can be located. And then we wouldn't have to do these large sweeps to try to identify people. It also allows us to well inform the community. Hey, here's what the process is. This is what's going to happen if your loved one is picked up. This is what's happening here. So that's very important to the people. And then once they have an understanding of the process and understand what their rights are, it calms everybody down. And so that's where the chaos is coming from, right? When we're telling cops, don't help out other cops, you know, there are guys on the ground that just don't understand that. What do you mean, right? How do we not help these guys out? And here's the most important part that people need to realize. Even if you did say no, the fallout is going to end up in your city anyway, right? So it's best to be in front of it than to have to respond to it. And so that's what I think is important. What we should be doing is be involved, communicate with our partners, and let's make this job that much easier. And we wouldn't have needed, 3,000, agents in the area. We could have got this done, and people could have been informed. Hey, we're not out here just grabbing anybody, right? We're out here identifying a specific group of people, and so that's what's important. And I do want to say this because it always comes up. People always say we're racially profiling. Okay, so I want to get it out the way so that everybody can understand. Whether we like admitting it or not, in policing, you have to racially profile of some kind. That's how we identify people. That's how we determine the differences between things. And this is a tool that law enforcement has used for years to identify when something was out of the norm. And it's just the way it is. So we don't have to keep hiding it like it's something bad. It's part of the process.
Well, what's sad is that because of all the chaos that's been created, good people do get caught up in it.
Yeah.
And if you're a person, I have children of multiple ethnicities, and there is no question that these are issues that happen in their daily lives and in healthcare. It's not just a police problem, right? Literally, it's not just a police problem. On the other hand, when people are just open and talk to people and communicate, a lot of that stuff can fall away.
Yeah.
And what we're having now is, if I'm a person who's here legally, I don't want to have to be afraid, but actually you shouldn't be afraid. Because if you're if you're open and don't fight and say, hey, this is the deal, how at risk are you really generally?
Right.
You know what I mean?
And so when we paint the picture that we're just going to go out and randomly snatch people up, that's what creates the
Right.
fear. But if the local law enforcement are not directing you to specifically where these individuals are, giving you the addresses,
Right.
then you're forced to kind of patrol areas where you think people are hanging out at, right? And so that's kind of what these guys are doing. They're looking for bad actors and they're trying to identify them. And so it's a little bit hard because even though you want to soft-handed, people still have weapons, right? We still have to be prepared to handle if it goes bad, So a lot of people say, well, he wasn't armed, or he's just a cook, he was a nurse. But even nurses go bad, right? And so you have to be prepared if that happens. And so in this particular case, what like Van said, we have to have guys come in and protect the guys who are trying to actually enforce it, because the local PD has decided we're not going to be a part of that process. And so people then drew that conclusion, well, there must be something bad here and we don't have to follow direction. And so people should be clear that when an officer gives you a lawful order and they're in the capacity of doing their job, you are required by statute, right, to follow that lawful order and comply. And so on my talk show called Let's Talk About It, we teach something called a backpack, right? And that backpack consists of making sure you got your driver's license, an ID with you so that you're easily identifiable, that you stay calm, you keep your hands where they can be seen, you let the officer go through his spiel. And so this is teaching you to just kind of tone down the behaviors, right? Then the guy can actually deal with you individually and not the actions, right? Because if your hands are flailing all over the place and I don't know you, it becomes a personal threat. So.
I think it's great you mentioned ID
Mm-hmm.
because there's this theory that goes out there that we're told that somehow a lot of people in the inner city don't have IDs. I think they do have IDs.
Yeah, they do.
And so I think it's like with elections and voting. It's one of the big issues, right? So people have IDs. Everybody should have an ID.
Yeah,
How do you have a
Yeah.
bank
Well,
account without an ID?
But
So it
but
doesn't
I want to
matter.
be clear. I don't want to live in a country where I have to carry my papers with me everywhere I go. Right. This is not
Well,
the
of course
goal of
not.
what we want to do.
Right.
But at this moment where we have
Right.
tens of millions of people who are here unlawfully, and we're trying to sort through and figure out who is supposed to be here and who is not, um, uh, having ID speeds up due process. But if you don't have ID and you're picked up and suspected of being here unlawfully, we do have due process where you're afforded time
Right.
to in the process to bring forward your documentation to show you're here lawfully. I have people criticizing me online saying, well, they arrested a citizen. Well, you know what? The police arrest innocent people all the time, because they're directed to arrest this person. It's not up to them to be the courts to decide if it was correct or not, right? We innocent people are every week are allowed to prove their innocence in this due process. So it happens on occasion where an innocent person is picked up by law enforcement, and then they can prove their innocence, and then they're released. That's how it works.
Right.
And you have ID. You do
Yeah.
have ID. And I have ID. And you have ID.
And I think what
Right.
it is a lot of people don't understand too. There's a small little window there when you're not necessarily under arrest, but you're being legally detained, because we're trying to determine if a crime has
Right.
occurred or not, or maybe who you are. So it works a lot faster when you go, hey, I'm Joe Banks. Right. Here's my ID. I'm a citizen. Now I can actually take time. I can process you faster. We know who you are, and you're on your way. But when I don't tell you anything. I don't have to cooperate. I'm trying to do a job here, and that job requires that I collect certain data to be able to know who I had contact with. And so I have uniquely been around long enough in law enforcement to say that, we used to just identify everybody that we had contact with, because maybe next week this guy might have contact with him, and we've got that information here. And that's how we solved crimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was, we did a normal traffic stop. It was for a petty offense, maybe a light broken out, and now we got a guy who's wanted for murder. So, that's how you do the job. And so people have gotten away from that because of technology with Zoom and cameras and everything. And I think without knowing the real backstory, without knowing what the whole process is, it looks like, oh my God, they're fighting and they're choking the guy out. But the reality of it is you only capture one portion of what took place, right? And we have to have all of the puzzle to put together. So
Yeah.
Well, I do want to talk briefly about this 5-year-old child that's been in the news lately. About a year ago, when we were talking about the 2026 election, I said Republicans are going to have a real hard time because there's going to be a lot of imagery out there, like the Alien Gonzalez photo from the 1990s during the Clinton administration, where they had, an armed, armed to the kill hilt people go in and take this child. That image went around the world and became, so famous and so impactful in politics. And now we had someone who was picked up, and they had an option of either taking their child with them into custody or leaving their 5-year-old child with a trusted person who was lawfully here. And the person that was picked up I'm told, said, "I want them to come with me." So the child was abandoned by the person that was suspected of a crime, and then the father wanted the child detained, so that's why they were in custody. But it's being spun as if that child was used as bait and somehow taken.
Yeah, I think it's a play on words too. I mean, I always say this because not actually being there, we kind of have hypothesized. But I mean, when you do take someone in custody and they decide their child wants to go with them, the child is kind of limited as far as where they can go because at some point you still have to process this person into the system. And so it now becomes a child protection issue where we now have to still take care of this child and put them into the system, and there's a process for that.
Yeah. When we come back from the break, we'll get into this issue more with candidate Joseph Banks. Joseph. Yeah.
Okay, let's begin.
Welcome back to Political Pitchforks on AM 1280 The Patriot. I'm Jeremy Munson, a former state rep with Susan Sjogren Smith, and we are interviewing Joseph Banks. And I apologize to Joseph after the last segment because I had caught myself and thought it was the wrong name because there's a retail store, Joseph A. Banks, that I thought maybe I was conflating with. But no, it is Joseph Banks, and he is not the proprietor of the clothing store. We're talking about his run for Hennepin County Sheriff, and specifically around a story recently in the news about this 5-year-old child that NPR News and other liberal news media have said that was detained by ICE. And this is a real problem where people come to this country either with a minor child or have a child here. They did not have permission to be in this country, and yet a child that's born, and this has never been adjudicated, federally, whether a child of illegal immigrants does have birthright citizenship if the parents never had permission to be in this country. But as it is today, we treat them as citizens, and when someone is detained, they have to choose. And it doesn't even matter if it's about immigration. If someone is detained because they're drunk driving and they have a child in the car, the child has to go into protective services until the state can figure out who should be, taking custody of that child. So, Joseph, you were talking about this issue and kind of how to deal with it, but maybe how the media is also spinning this out of proportion.
Yeah, I think it's important to know that cops do have some legal obligation to make sure the kids are safe. So, I think it's a kind of a play on words. Saying the kid was arrested versus he was placed in protective custody is it's a play on words, but it makes good for media, right? The optics sound a lot better when you're trying to persuade a certain group in one direction or the other. What's important to understand is that cops are out here along with federal agencies trying to keep everybody safe in the community. And I think we're not frowning on immigrants because we do want immigrants here in America. That's how America was built and founded, and that's what, great contributors. But we do want to make sure that people are following the laws and are in compliance with what those laws are when they remain here. And so the way we do that is, community being involved, community being well informed. And that's the important part. Find out about what these laws are. Don't just take somebody's word. Do the homework. I think over the years we've gotten away from teaching it in school as much as we used to. So a lot of people don't understand the process and how long it's taken. And we keep coming back to how long it's taken because we're not dealing with guys that got here yesterday. We're talking about folks who have been here for a while and had a chance to get roots in. And whether they were bad actors or not, you're not just going to snatch them out. It takes a little bit to get them out the country. So, if you want to see some immigration get better, support some immigration reform, get involved, but it's the people to change the laws. But for right now, our ICE agents are acting on the laws that are currently in place, right? So instead of being angry at the Capitol, talk to your legislation, get involved, and see if there's a way to get a bill on the floor to improve things to make the process a little faster, a little better, and a little cleaner. But that's pretty much what it is.
On that note, I want to just talk about you said change the law. Well, one of the things that Peggy Flanagan, who's running for U.S. Senate, is criticizing her opponent on the Democrat side, Congresswoman Angie Craig, and Amy Klobuchar is tied into this too, is both Craig and Klobuchar supported the Lincoln-Riley Act, which is responsible for funding this big increase in ICE agents to round up criminal illegal immigrants and deport them. Now, they didn't vote for the bill. I mean, maybe Craig voted for the bill, but Amy Klobuchar in the Senate voted favorably for a motion to move the bill forward. It's the only reason it could pass, by getting through some of the hurdles in the Senate. So both of them supported the bill in some manner. And then now this is the actions that happened because of that bill. There were a lot of Democrats that voted for that. I mean, how can you not vote for removing, child predators and other, hardened criminals who are here, who are in the country without permission? They helped support that. So, criticism should go on Democrats too for having, and then criticism, but they are responsible for this large increase in law enforcement that's here in Minnesota.
I think too, people have to understand that everyone's on board until it affects family and friends, right? And I think that's what, we do have these laws in place for a reason. And yes, sometimes, I've had a friend arrested and transported from Freeborn County to Texas, and he's from the Bahamas, and he was in a pending status, okay? But the bottom line of it is, there was some question. Right. And you can't get away from that. We're going to have these laws. They're not going to always be popular, but we have to stand on the side of what's right. And the overall goal is to gain compliance. We're not looking to separate families or things of that nature, but we want to do things properly. And people need to help us get through that process. Like I say, if we could figure out a way to get this process done in a week to 2 weeks, it's going to be a whole lot better than trying to do it in 10 years down the road when some guy's like, are you serious? I've got an entire business here. I've got things going on. Whatever the enterprise is going on. And now you mean I didn't make the cut? You didn't make the cut. And if you don't make the cut, whether you like it or not, you got to pack it up, It's just kind of how it is. So I think that's the biggest thing, is that we have to figure out ways to educate people so they understand the process a lot more. And, I think people misunderstand what that First Amendment right is, kind of out there, what it really encompasses. But here's what I like about Martin Luther King. Even when he brought attention to things, it was not necessarily race-based as much as it was he wanted us all to see something wrong, right? He wanted us all to look at it and agree that, hey, this is something that should be different. And not only when he drew that attention, though, but he had a plan, right? He said, hey, we've thought this out. We've worked with the attorneys. Now that we got your attention, here's how we're going to carry that plan out and get things done. But it wasn't by violence, right? So that's an important part.
Yeah,
well, you brought up the First Amendment, and recently we had this issue where protesters entered a house of worship to disrupt services because they wanted to prove a point or claim it that the pastor or the priest was involved with ICE in some manner. And those people now have been arrested because their right to protest ends where they encroach on someone else's right under the First Amendment to peaceably assemble or practice their religion. And those people have been arrested. The term the media likes to use is protesters when they've crossed the line and actually interfered with the police being able to enforce the law. They're no longer protesting, right? They're impeding law enforcement.
Yeah, and I think it's important that people understand. I know some things are done for an impact. You want to sway people in one direction or another, but you have to pay attention to what the laws are and how they're going to affect you and what your actions could lead to, right? Everybody should enjoy that right, but I think just like everyone's screaming, don't run into the schools for immigration, don't run into the jobs. There's a time and place for everything. You could have had that peaceful protest outside the church.
Right.
It could have occurred outside there, but I think, when you enter, you are looking to have a great impact. It's just you may not like the outcome.
I think, for me, one of the things that's very frustrating about this is the civil rights movement, which affected not just people of color, but their disability rights. I mean, women's rights, civil rights affect many, many issues. But when you're in America, we are a country that has a set of principles. And when we are failing to serve our citizens because we are falling short on the rights that we all should share, then those are legitimate American problems that we should be addressing head on and having those debates. And we aren't going to always agree about when it's a civil right versus when it's a preference or when it's whatever. But the truth is that everybody can't live in America.
Right.
And really, America is supposed to be that light on the hill that helps provide evidence to people all over the world that it's not really actually the American dream, because all men, all people have unalienable rights, whether you live in America or whether you live somewhere else. For us, we believe everybody has those rights, which is why when we see the things happening in Iran with protesters being killed, or we see slaughters in villages around the country, it hurts us. But we can't police the world, and we also can't have everybody move here. But what we hope is that eventually people in those countries will be able to rise up. And it is hard. We've had civil war in this country, and maybe I hope we don't end up there again. But this problem that the rights of people in America aren't the rights of people everywhere else. And if we would spend more time as Americans learning about the tyranny around the world and the truth that is what we need to be opposed to, because people shouldn't have to flee El Salvador, Nicaragua. It doesn't matter the country. They shouldn't have to flee a country to come to America,
Right.
because the whole world should recognize people have the right to be free no matter where they live. This is insane. And we fight like America is the root of the evil. And I'm not saying we don't have some pretty evil people on both sides doing bad things. I'm saying we should be the voice of encouraging freedom everywhere.
Well, I mean, remember, America is the great experiment. We didn't say we had conclusion and
Correct.
findings. We're still working on it.
Right.
But we're the shining example of what could be if everybody kind of got on the same page.
Yeah.
And so you have the opportunity of the pursuit of happiness,
Right.
as long as you're a contributor in a positive fashion.
Right.
So we invite you to come here,
Right.
through the process,
Yeah.
be a positive contributor. But if you're not going to be a positive contributor, if you're not going to be willing to go through the process,
Right.
then that of course we're going to ask you to go back where you came from, and that's not being mean. That's just kind of going, hey, when you I want to attribute it to sports, right?
Right.
When you pick the guy up, he looked great on paper, and when you got here, he didn't play up to the expectations. So unfortunately, we got to let you go,
Right.
right? And that's kind of what happens. But our process is we let them play so long that when it's time to go, they feel the entitlement, and they're thinking, wait, I've been here long enough. I'm a citizen. I mean, you've
And
been
people
in-
like him. Some
right,
of those fans
right.
like the
You've
guy.
been here a long time, but you
Right.
still haven't made it through the process. So
Right.
we just have to, like I said, we have to, make sure people understand that it is a process. And like I say, maybe we could get with our legislators and speed that process up if that would help us out. I don't think we've ever thought about trying to speed the process.
Yeah. Yep. Well, we thank you guys for joining us. We're going to be back for another segment, and this is a great conversation. Okay.
Okay, let's begin.
Welcome back to Political Pitchforks on AM 1280 The Patriot. I'm Jeremy Munson and co-host Susan Smith. We are here with Joseph Banks, a candidate for Hennepin County Sheriff. And we've been talking a lot about ICE and this whole stuff. I posted on Facebook, I think like 20 black and just pure black photos and said, here are all the photos of the protests and anti-ICE movements opposing President Clinton as he deported 12 million illegal immigrants. President Obama, who was called the deporter-in-chief, he deported 6 million people. Joe Biden deported 2.8 million people. And here's the photos of all the protests opposing that. nothing, right? This is a distraction in Minnesota that is distracting us from talking about fraud and other issues. So we're going to move away from that topic for this last segment. I want to talk about some of the issues that are important to independence in Hennepin County. There's been a lot of talk about zero bail or no cash bail. There's been people talking like on the law enforcement side of like, why are we making these arrests if they're not being prosecuted? It's just a complete waste of time. Joseph, what are your opinions on the bail? You're in the bail bonds business right now. What are your opinions on bail and on police using discretion on whether they pick people up?
Well, for the bailing stuff, I think right away we have to look at the judges just have to be tough, right? People need to pay attention to these judges you elect too, because a lot of them are unopposed when they go. But you have
True
to look.
that.
Yeah, they're the final cause because they can actually turn down a deal that the prosecution and defendants, defense attorneys bring to them if they feel like the person's a threat to the community. So it's at that time they can go, you know what, nope, I'm not accepting this deal. We're going to remand this person into custody without bail, and that just doesn't happen. And what we do see on the flip side of it is the guy who maybe had a small crime, his bail is $100,000. The guy who shot 5 people, his bail is $70,000. And so how the bonding industry works is that, people pay a bonding company 10%, and then we post that bail on their behalf through insurance checks. And so they only had to come out of pocket with $7,000. Now, a lot of times if the person can't afford the total amount, then we set them up with a payment plan. So technically, a guy could be out back on the street within a matter of hours. Now, in Hennepin, it takes 4 to 6 hours to get booked in and 4 to 6 hours to get released. But if the guy got arrested on Thursday, technically 5 o'clock the next day, he could be out on the street and back doing more crimes. And where cops are getting frustrated is they see that, especially since a lot of our offenders now are juvenile offenders. And so I don't think that people understand the impact that, I want to say that Mary Moriarty, being the county prosecutor, is not doing anything that she didn't campaign on. And so people misunderstand. Yes, she's in the prosecution's office, but her mindset is more that of a defense protecting, right? Which is good to some degree because she's supposed to protect all of our rights. But at the same time, when we bring you cases, we need you to prosecute them. And so that's why I say that the sheriff needs to have a conversation with the prosecutor. They should be buddies. They should be having that conversation like, hey, what's been working for the guys out there? What's not been working out there? What we keep hearing from the sheriff is, oh, I was just as surprised by the officers, you know what I mean? That they didn't do certain things. And the reality of it is, why aren't we at lunch going, hey, you know what, that didn't work last week, and here's how it impacted my guys, and we had X amount of cops hurt trying to pursue these guys, and so things of that nature. Right. So those are the conversations we need to be having. And then unfortunately, when you have situations like in Minneapolis where, unfortunately the commissioner of public safety has taken a job, he went from being a chief justice to being the commissioner of public safety, when he would have had more impact as the chief justice. When you're supervising judges, you can say, hey, guys, we can do it better this way. I don't know how much power you have as the commissioner of public safety in terms of being able to keep people safe. You get a lot better job of it as a chief justice. So it's just a lot of questionable things like that. Now, in terms of officer discretion, we want to be teaching cops that you don't have to arrest everybody, right? The goal is to gain compliance and to educate people so they don't have to go to jail, not to see how many people we can actually arrest. And so when we talk in terms of flooding the system with, meaningless crimes, yeah, we can start doing some conversations, having some conversations with community members and start looking at alternative services. One of the big things is determining whether or not a person in custody needs to be prosecuted, because a lot of our folks that are in custody have addiction and mental health issues. Right. And so we should be, deferring them to service versus, putting them inside the jails, right? And there's a lot of people sitting in jail that really need to be in front of a physician. So we need to be pushing that a lot more in the community for our cops to look for those abilities to be able to do something different than just arrest people.
How are we going to fix that mental health system? I mean, I think what you're saying is really right. We got a lot of kids coming up that have experienced some horrible things. They've seen things. They've been scared. they get connected with people that encourage them to go down the wrong path, and we don't have enough help.
Right. We have to spend the money properly. I don't know why we don't have facilities in place for our juvenile offenders that we could house those ones who are violent so they can get proper therapy and things of that nature. We should have, given the nature of the last 5 years, we've watched our young offenders, violent offenders, go up with no program to send them to. And all we've been saying is, yeah, man, we don't have any place to house them. So what's happening is those kids are going home on ankle monitors. Those kids are going home, cutting those ankle monitors, and they're back out there doing major crime. So, these are the things that we have to make the adjustments for. If you're going to spend the money, let's spend the money. I think people are okay with you spending the money as long as it's being spent properly and where it needs to be spent.
Well, and we don't have enough beds. The children's beds in mental health, there's just nowhere near the amount of help, and many of the programs don't have the capacity to provide the family therapy, because a lot of these kids, the family all needs to be engaged in the process of helping that kid get what they need, and we just don't have the capacity, number one, to even require it.
Yeah,
right?
and we have to work with legislation to get it in place, because whether he's 12 or 25, when someone shoots you, you want that person to be held accountable. And we need to be able to hold them accountable. And if there's something in that child's life that we can fix by getting them in the proper facility, we need to do that. We have to hold people accountable. We can't keep letting them go because we don't have the space. It's not working. And in fact, you see parents going, I've tried everything. And I haven't gotten any assistance. And the cops are going, well, we did our part. We chased him down, and in 2 hours he was released, right? And so that's
$20 billion of fraud later. We could have done a lot.
Right.
So
Joseph, I want to just interject here, because if people want to get to know more about you and your campaign for sheriff, they can go to banks and the number 4 sheriff.com, banksforsheriff.com. And then can you also tell us about your weekly podcast or radio show that you have?
Sure. We have a podcast that we do on CCX Creates. It's a part of CCX Media. It's done every Wednesday from 5 to 6, where we allow the community to come on and talk about issues that are affecting them in the community, as well as any businesses or services they're providing in the community. So we provide the community with a voice to kind of talk about what's happening around them.
And how do they listen to that? They find it on Apple Podcast, or
it's on Facebook. I think it's on YouTube. It's on cable, CCX cable. And then, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Okay.
I think we've got, your number one priority, as we wrap up, we've got just under 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
What's your number one thing that you think you would do as sheriff that would make a difference?
Definitely working with our federal partners to let them know that we're all a team. And through that, we're going to be keeping the community safe. We're going to actually drive crime down, right? Because I know they've inflated the numbers that crime has dropped. But we're going to actually drive crime down. We're going to work with the community to identify and solve problems. And we're going to use that community policing structure. We're going to hire folks who live here that are from the community, that have something to contribute. And we're going to make, Hennepin a much better place to live and a safe place to be.
What do you think, Jeremy? I think it's a pretty good plan.
Yeah, fantastic. And also, I've heard that you're seeking the Republican endorsement or recommendation, as we call it in the party. Is that right?
Yes, we are definitely seeking a Republican Party. I'm excited this year that my ability to share some of the same views with the Republicans. We line up pretty good right now. We're definitely lining up pretty good with what we want to do to keep Hennepin County safe.
I think we all like to keep Hennepin County safe.
Yes.
I lived in Hennepin County most of my life, and what's happening now, the division and the rhetoric, the false rhetoric, is it's terrible. And yes, there's always been fighting, but what's happening now today, the fear that's being instilled in people, I just think most people are good people. Most people want to find a way to work with their neighbors in their community. They want their kids to be safe. We actually have far more common ground than they want us to believe, because it's only through division that they can control us.
Yes.
So, Jeremy, close it out?
Nope. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in for another episode of Political Pitchforks on AM 1280 The Patriot.